Okay, hitters, so in today's history, we're basically going to go over what a LRRP is. Now, we're also going to touch base on what a LRRSR is, what a RASTA unit is, and if there is indeed a difference between a LRRP unit, a LRRSR unit, or a RASTA unit. So, to begin with, let's go over what these acronyms mean to these units, or the nomenclature of these units, if you're tracking with me on that. So, a LRRP unit, Lima Romeo Romeo Papa, pronounced LRRP, LURP, is a long-range reconnaissance patrol. A LRRSR unit, long range reconnaissance, surveillance, and report, and to round it out, a RASTA unit would be that of reconnaissance, surveillance, and target acquisition. So all three of these units are actually a cog in the machine of the long range reconnaissance patrol. However, depending on when you served in the military would depend on what unit you were actually with. And basically what I mean by that is basically if you served in the United States Army, it would depend on what years you actually served, would depend on if you were referred to as LRRP, LRRSR, or RASTA. I can tell you this though, during my time with RASTA, about 90 days prior to that, that unit was actually considered a LRRSR unit. And as the squadron's RASTA unit, we were more times than not just referred to as the LRRP unit. And that's how we liked it, because it gave mad props to the LRRPs, those badass pipe swingers in the Vietnam era. And, you know, I've stated this in many of my histories that it was, I mean, it basically got my dick hard watching those hitters, those LRRPs from NAM, walking around base and their ODs with all their badges and knowing they were LRRP. You're damn skippy, man. It made me very proud when the squadron commander would refer to us as LRRPs instead of RASTA. Okay, so tracking on. So specifically, when I was doing this history and the build that follows, I was specifically thinking of the LRRPs in Vietnam. That's specifically what always comes to mind, and it's probably because of their tradition and my tradition as being a reconnaissance scout that made me want to focus more on them. But it would be doing all of you guys an injustice if I didn't run down a history that dates back way before them. So basically, the concepts of scouts date back to the origins of warfare itself. And with that being said, I'm not saying that scouts are the only ones involved in a long-range reconnaissance patrol, because that's nonsense. There are many other MOSs, military occupational skills, that actually track on this, as well as different divisions within a military, or the Department of Defense, for instance, the Marine Corps, of course, they got their own. Air Force got their own. So the concept of scouts date back to the origins of warfare itself. However, in modern times, these specialized units evolved from examples such as Rogers Rangers. If you don't know who that character is, you need to go ahead and Google that, because that's pretty important stuff right there, especially if you belong in my line of pedigree. It's Rogers Rangers in colonial British America, the Lovat Scouts in World War I, the Long Range Desert Group, which I've definitely mentioned them in my reconnaissance videos that I have done, and the SAS, which I have 3 history and builds on those hitters in the SAS. And basically, they recon the Western Desert Campaign and Northwest Europe. Similar units such as Force 136 in East Asia and the Special Light Infantry units in the Finnish Army during the Second World War. And those Finns, back in the day, I'm not saying that today they're not, but come on, back in the day, you could not, it was hard to fuck with the Finnish LRRSR, or LRRP, in the Second World War. So a lot of shouts out to the Finns there, who really, they gave a bigger blueprint to Germany than anyone else. However, the Finns were known for their LRRSR capability back in the Second World War. Post-war, the role was carried out in various North Atlantic Treaty Organizations. What does that mean, peeps? You know what that means. It means NATO. We covered it in the ISAF video in history. So basically, North Atlantic Treaty Organization and British Commonwealth countries by units that could trace their origins to these wartime creations, such as the British SAS, Australian Special Air Service Regiment, and the New Zealand's Special Air Service, United States Army Rangers, long-range surveillance teams, and reconnaissance surveillance and target acquisition, which we've already covered, basically LRRP, United States Army Rangers, yeah, we do a little LRRSR out there, as well as stated RASTA. And basically we got that blueprint, the LRRSR, LRRP, RASTA, all those blueprints really came from the hitters decades and decades ago. I know that a lot of people think that you say LRRP, same with myself, you think automatically of the Vietnam hitters, which I've already stated, this is kind of what I'm going for. But again, I have to throw out everything in this history. However, they were far from the first LRRP unit. All the lessons that we have learned since the beginning of warfare has developed into what we now know as LRRP, LRRSR, or RASTA. So like we've been talking about, right, the use of scouts is ancient, or the use of LRRPs are ancient. However, during the French and Indian War, basically 1754 to 1763, the techniques of long-range reconnaissance and ratings were significantly implemented by the British in colonial America. The British employed the American Major Robert Rogers, and if you hadn't Googled him by now, I'll go ahead and let you know that is basically the big kahuna of the United States Army Rangers. Point of fact, when I went to training to be a reconnaissance scout as well as an airborne ranger, the first document that we received were the standing orders by Captain/Major Robert Rogers. He had that much of an influence on the United States side as well, I'm sure, on the British side of LRRP activity. So, tracking on with that in mind, the British employed the American Major Robert Rogers to make long-range attacks against the French and their Indian allies along the frontiers of the British colonies and New France. The achievements of Major Roberts' dozen companies of approximately 1,200 troops during the French and Indian War were so extraordinary that this doctrine, Standing Orders, Rogers Rangers from 1759, became the cornerstone of the future U.S. Army long-range reconnaissance patrol units, including the U.S. Army Rangers, and indeed the Special Operations Light LRRP, Light Infantry community, as stated. Some of the first, in fact, it was not one of the first, it was the first document that we reviewed during my time when I went to school as a reconnaissance scout and airborne ranger. So with that being said, and I know this history might be getting a little long, but to hell with that, because all you guys know, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it damn right the first time. So with that being said, let's take a look at the Rogers Rangers Standing Orders from 1759. Don't forget nothing. Have your musket clean as a whistle, hat scored, 60 rounds, powder and ball, and be ready to march at a minute's warning. When you're on the march, act the way you would if you were sneaking up on a deer. See the enemies first. Tell the truth about what you see and do. There is an army depending on us for correct information. You can lie all you fucking want when you tell other folks about the Rangers, but don't ever lie to a ranger or officer. Don't never take a chance you don't have to. When we're on the march, we march single file, far enough apart so one shot can't go through two men. If we strike swamps or soft ground, we spread out abreast, so it's hard to track us. When we march, we keep moving till dark so as to give the enemy the least possible chance at us. When we can't, half the party stays awake while the other half sleeps. If we take prisoners, we keep them separate till we have had time to examine them so they can't cook up a story between them. Don't ever march home the same way. Take a different route so you won't be ambushed. No matter whether we travel in big parties or little ones, each party has to keep a scout 20 yards ahead 20 yards on each flank and 20 yards in the rear, so the main body can't be snuck up and surprised and wiped out. Every night, you'll be told where to meet if surrounded by superior force. Don't sit down to eat without posting sentries. Don't sleep beyond dawn. Dawn's when the French and Indians attack. Don't cross a river by a regular ford. If somebody's trailing you, make a circle. Come back into your own tracks and ambush them. The folks that aim to ambush you. Don't stand up when the enemy's coming against you. Kneel down. Hide behind a tree. Get some cover, dummy. Let the enemy come till he's almost enough to touch. Then let him have it and jump out and finish him up with your freaking hatchet. So there you have it, the standing orders of Rogers Rangers from 1759, and to my knowledge, this document still gets handed out in LRRP school, Ranger school, you name it. Any high-speed unit that is involved in long-range reconnaissance and patrol will be handed this document, and trust me, at least if you are a Ranger, you better freaking know this, as well as the Ranger Creed. Okay, to finish it up, actually, there is so much more I could talk about, but I know the history is getting a little long because we've got the build coming up next. However, right now I want to talk about different units from other countries because I have mentioned the United States, even though I'm aware that I mentioned the SAS and other reconnaissance forces. Now, what I'm going to do is put these in alphabetical order. In my opinion, yes, I believe they are the best of the best of the best. But I'm not going to line them up like that. Because I don't want you cupcakes getting soft on me and go report me to my congressman. So, let's start out with Australia. During the Second World War, the 21st North Australian Observer Unit was tasked with patrolling the remote areas of Northern Australia on horseback. The Canadian Rangers conduct long-range surveillance or sovereignty patrols in the sparsely settled areas of northern Canada. Although part of the Canadian Army, they are an irregular military force. Denmark, an all-volunteer unit within the Danish Home Guard that is now called Special Support and Reconnaissance Company, basically the SSR. In Finland, long-range patrols were especially notable during World War II. As stated, the 4th Detachment Battalion was basically a command of 4 different long-range patrol detachments. And here's a fact for you. Not to say that I wasn't impressed enough when I was researching Finland and their long-range patrol units in World War II. Former President of Finland, and I'm sure I butchered that pretty much, served and specially designed a Jaeger company called Detachment Tornai in the Finnish 1st Infantry Division. He also became a U.S. citizen and entered the U.S. Army Special Forces. He gave important knowledge and instruction in long-range patrolling during the Vietnam era and was declared MIA during the Vietnam War in 1965 until his remains were found and were buried in the Arlington National Cemetery in the United States on 26 June 2003. In Germany, their LRRP is called Feuerwehr, and basically this unit were modeled after the Finnish long-range patrols of World War II and are part of the Special Operations Division in Germany, the FSLK 200. India's Special Frontier Force is considered a long-range reconnaissance patrol or Pathfinder. Italy, historically, airborne units are normally tasked with carrying out a part of the ordinary airborne assaults, deep infiltrations within small unit reconnaissance. And the Netherlands, basically the Netherlands Marshof Sea Squadron, consists of 2 special recon units, mountain leaders and special forces underwater operators. In Norway, the Norwegian Army has a LRRP operation dating back to the 1960s. The current LRRP unit, yeah, I wasn't even trying to pronounce that. In Portugal, presently in the Portuguese Army, the LRRP operations are carried out by the Long Range Reconnaissance Unit of the Special Operations Force. Serbia, they're in the ACT LRRP units within the Serbian Army Special Brigade, and the 72nd Reconnaissance Commando Battalion have been operating since 1992. In the UK, the Honourable Artillery Company and its regular sister unit, the 473rd Phoenix Special Operation Post Battery, currently operate in this role. During the Second World War, the Long Range Desert Group, again, which I really have done extensive research on this unit because these were hitters from back in the day and performed long-range reconnaissance and raiding during the North African campaign and during the Cold War. The Corps Patrol Unit, CPU, consisted of 23 and 23rd SAS and the HAC. And last but not least, you know, when you go in alphabetical order, United States is always in the rear, but let's face it, we're in the forefront as well. So, in the United States in World War II, the predecessor of the U.S. Army LRRP teams was the U.S. 6th Army Special Reconnaissance Unit, better known as the Alamo Scouts. In the Southwest Pacific Theater of Operations, the Alamo Scouts conducted over 110 intelligence gathering missions behind enemy lines throughout New Guinea and the Philippines during 1944 and 1945. Basically, the Alamo Scouts Training Center to train candidates in long-range reconnaissance patrol techniques, including rubber boat handling, intelligence gathering, report writing, scouting and patrolling, jungle navigation, communications, weapons training, and camouflage. Of those that successfully completed the rigorous course, 138 became full-time Alamo Scouts, while the others returned to their units to serve as reconnaissance troops. After Japan surrendered, the Alamo Scouts Training Center was closed down and the unit was disbanded. In 1988, though, the U.S. Army retroactively awarded members of the Alamo Scouts the Special Forces tab due to their wartime record and the techniques that they actually pioneered. And that's something else, man. When the United States Army decides that, you know what, you hitters don't got to go through C or Q school, you guys can just straight up have this SF tab. So that right there tells you how badass these Alamo Scouts were, which I can almost guarantee you there might be 1% of you hitters out there that even know about the Alamo Scouts and that their members basically were awarded the SF tab. So, as you know by now, we're usually into the build. But to be honest, when I start talking LRRP, when I start talking Lurser, when I start talking Rasta, I don't know if you can tell, but I get fucking excited, man, because anything that I am passionate about, and trust me, I'm passionate about being a bad boy. But I'm also so passionate about being involved in part of this outstanding fucking history of long-range reconnaissance patrol. Like I have footprints on the ground with reconnaissance patrols, So with that being said, we're just going to track on with a little more history, So pop you another beer, another pop, grab your water, throw in another lipper, or what the fuck ever. But we're going to keep tracking with the Vietnam LRRP, Okay, so I know that you guys are getting like, oh, damn history. So all I got to put out is good morning, Vietnam. Let's track. So, in December 1965, the 1st Brigade, 101st Airborne Division, formed a LRRP platoon. And by April 1966, the 1st Infantry Division, 25th Infantry Division, and each of the 4 battalions of the 173rd Sky Soldiers, Airborne Brigade, shouts out to you, Pop, formed LRRP units as well. On 8 July 1966, General William Westmoreland authorized the formation of a LRRP unit in each infantry brigade or division in Vietnam. By 1967, formal LRRP companies were organized, most having 3 platoons each with 5 to 6 man teams equipped with VHF, FM, AN, Prick 25 radios. LRRP training was notoriously rigorous, and team leaders were often graduates of the U.S. Army's 5th Special Forces Recondo School in Nha Trang, Vietnam. So I want to specifically talk about a unit, Tiger Force. My dad used to talk about Tiger Force while he still had boots on ground on this earth. So Tiger Force was the nickname of a long-range reconnaissance patrol unit of the 1st Battalion Airborne 327th Infantry Regiment. Basically, their high body counts were recognized and encouraged by military officials. Their commander, Colonel Morse, ordered troops to rack up a body count of 327 casualties in order to match the battalion's infantry designation 327. However, by the end of the campaign, soldiers were congratulated for their 1,000th kill. The platoon-sized unit, approximately 45 paratroopers, was founded by Colonel David Hackworth in November 1965 to out-guerrilla the guerrillas. Tiger Force Recon, 1st and the 27th, was a highly decorated small unit in Vietnam and paid for its reputation with heavy casualties, unfortunately. But in October 1968, Tiger Force's parent battalion was awarded the Presidential Unit Citation by President Lyndon B. Johnson, which included a mention of Tiger Force's service at Hijato in June 1966. So, trekking on. Wait a second. You hitters hear that? You guys hear that? It's the damn leathernecks crying because I hadn't mentioned them in today's LRRP history. So basically, the U.S. Marine Corps also performed long-range reconnaissance missions typically assigned to Marine Recon, especially that of Force Recon at Corps level, as opposed to the Battalion Recon units answering to battalion commanders. Marine Recon teams typically were twice the size as Army LRRP teams and were more heavily armed. Due to the fact that they were more heavily armed, they sacrificed a degree of stealth. In addition, the Marines did not employ indigenous monter guards as front and rear scouts, as Army LRRPs and Special Forces team did, which proved invaluable in confusing the enemy if contact was made. That tactical employment of LRRPs was later evaluated to be generally used far too dangerously by commanders, who were pleased by the kill ratios of LRRP teams. Some reports as high as 400 enemy troops for every LRRP killed. That's a pretty good ratio, 400 to run. Writes one commander, during the course of war, LRRPs conducted about 23,000 long-range patrols. Of this amount, 2/3 resulted in enemy sightings. LRRPs also accounted for approximately 10,000 enemy KIA through ambushes, airstrikes, and artillery. So with that being said, operators on your feet! Let's uncircle the fucking wagons and get down range.